And I think something that you both are saying but haven't quite said is accessing the expert within, and how we have so much expertise internally that may not fit on an org chart or in your work description, that is all accessible by all of us. And what we do, or a big part of what we do, is trying to highlight that for people, have them bring their expertise to the surface, and then we add a few tools and give them some practice, and then they're able to elevate that and spread that. And it's way more sustainable in that way than it is relying on a Karen, Mark, and Ian to come fix the problem. What brings us
here? What are we talking about today?
Well, actually, Karen, I'd like you to start today because, well, the last time we ended our conversation, we talked about, okay, what would our next conversation be? And you talked about a little bit about the expert model and kind of how we show up and what we offer and how that differs. So I thought maybe you'd be best to give a lead in to today's podcast.
I could. I don't know if you wanted to start, Mark, with just maybe, I didn't know if you wanted to open it, because I know it kind of came from a really cool conversation you and I had about your world. I'm happy to start, but I didn't know if you wanted to
start. Sounds like we're playing hot potato.
No, but Mark, I would add into it, but I don't know what makes better sense. So I'm happy to do it either way.
Up to right now, I didn't even remember what we were going to talk about today, because I just want to show up organically. So what are we talking about? What is it?
Well, that there is, I think the conversation we had with you, when you talked about your situation, which is really going with the expert model, hiring a consultant, having these kind of, I would say, like tools and just the way we approach supporting people or building leadership, or whatever you want to call it, just this model that we often find in organizations or in when we're growing, wanting to make culture change. I just thought it might be interesting for you to open this up, Mark, as just a conversation and exploring, and kind of building into why we've chosen a different path.
Well, that is an awesome introduction to the topic, because it sets the tone, because it's not just the existence, but that little introduction about what this is. And to your point, it is absolutely the model that we still encounter today everywhere. And we say, let's get an expert in. Let's bring an expert in on the topic. And then it becomes all focused on that expertise of one person. And it tends to do inadvertently a lot of things that you don't want, like exclude people who might have something to say, squash innovation, affect engagement, affect buy-in, which are two different things. So when we go to that expert model, we tend to, not intentionally, because we mean well, to avoid these things, to push them aside. Unless we get an expert who comes in, who is brutally aware of that culture, that dynamic, and on the flip side, those benefits if it was done differently. It speaks to our community of practice, which is coaching in a big way, because it really appeals as a practice, a culture, and if you want, a tool, an intentional tool. We all know that when people come in with an issue, very often they have the solution. They don't need an expert. They need clarity. They need focus. They need that little bit of control. And usually when you have one or those three or even more aspects, the expert is irrelevant. The expert's moot, because the expert is always missing one thing. They may have the expertise on the topic, but they don't have the expertise on the person and how the person is dealing with what's going on, or how that group of people is dealing with what's going on, or how that organization is dealing with their predicament or their opportunity. So the expert can provide some guidance, but I would rather see an expert show up and ask the right questions than provide the answers. That's how I would introduce this topic in this conversation.
I think we were this is a reliance model in my mind. So when you bring in an expert to fix something and then they go away at some point, and then now what? Now we're in our new predicament, our new problem, our new situation. Let's go back to the expert. It doesn't build any sort of sustainable model that can move forward from here. So I like the work that we do because we're often giving people tools and experience so that they're able to take on their situation from their perspective. I apologize for that. And take ownership of it and do it themselves. And I think that's part of, our raison d'être, reason for being here, is to help people become self-sustaining.
What I always loved about this is that the expert model has a reason to be, and I think it's the mindset that's drawn on. So what I really appreciated, why I liked the way this was transferred over to me, was to build, and we talked about changing the conversation and building coaching capacity as a tool or a way to have conversations. Why it attracted me to this as a manager at that time was that it allowed it to be accessible. I want to just talk about this because often the expert model, there's a lot of bucks attached to that, and that's not a bad thing. They've earned that, but we can often limit accessibility because of that. Or we say, let's work on the senior management team, or they typically will go to a specific area. And then there's the sustainability model is in there because there's a financial side of it, and also just time. I'm going to say the word time. And so what I like is it brings accessibility at all levels for people that are wanting to be engaged in a different way. You used an important word, Mark, engagement, because it brings people in and they start to participate and shape whatever that is. Ian and I were talking about this morning, that even when we offer this, we don't have a package that we bring to people. We have conversations with them. We ask them what's important to them. What are they trying to accomplish? What's the sustainability model, which is the other part? Replicable, accessible, affordable. These are really key, regardless of whatever's going on, so that it can be and practical. It just has to be transferable and doable in the hands of people. So, and the last thing I would say, we need to build the capacity where the conversations are happening. And I know there's expertise even in organizations. You'll have an HR expertise. I've even seen now engagement, whole areas of corporate engagement centers being created. But the challenge is it's been compartmentalized. And what we need to do is build that capacity, that professional amateur capacity where the conversations are happening. Where is that happening? Who do we go to when we have a challenge, when we're struggling, when we just need someone to listen to us, when we're in our home life, personal life, or our work life? We go to somebody we have a relationship with. Now that may be our boss. It may be, but it might not be. Typically, it's peer to peer. It's someone that you engage with and so that's why I'm getting people bumps when I talk about this, is when we do a peer-to-peer capacity building, when we bring it down to the various layers of a system, the engagement goes skyrocketing and they create the ripple effect. That's how you shift and change conversations. That's how you mobilize what you do a lot, what you are, spent a lot of time dedicating your development to, Mark, around change management. Is that piece is so critical. And we have to start there, not finish there. And, there may be pockets of where that then the expert model can start to zero in and tune in to where do I need to drop more, maybe a deeper part of that to support the larger picture. But it's an all play. It's you don't need to have be on the org chart or have a level of experience or have a job. So that's why it really attracts me, is finding that capacity, like the what I call the red tomatoes, that people just really, really want to do this kind of stuff and impact and influence in ways just in the day-to-day stuff that they do and in relationships they have. So that's why I said, what I wrote down today is, why is this important to us? Why have we stayed that course? That it's because, to me, that's how we change cultures. That's how we change ourselves. That's how we change the world. And boy, do we need that right now.
So the relationships, yeah, absolutely. So it comes back to relationship and in our way of being. And I'm going to circle back to that because, as you said, in my world, in the productivity and the change management world, we're all hung up on certifications. I'm a black belt, Lean Six Sigma black belt, and a certified change management practitioner. But that's what I do. So if you look at have, do, be do, have, and how you want to show up, that's what I do. But my way of being in those functions is more important than the tools and my certification and somebody asking me, can you come in and help us with this? Well, usually it doesn't show up like that. They say, can you come in and fix this? No, I can come in and guide you through some tools and some practices and work with the group, but it's our way of being relationships. They're tied in. Because how do you manage those relationships? How do you develop those? It's by your way of being, in your listening, by your way of being in your interaction. And that applies in change management because the first level is awareness. The second level is desire. You can't get through level awareness and desire because and you can't get to the other levels before going through those. Karen, what's awareness and desire?
Relationship.
Exactly. So the way of being in those expert models is more important than the models and the tools and the certifications and the training. You can have all that training and you can show up. And if you don't have that relationship, and if you're not showing up in a certain way that invites other people, create the environment for that engagement to happen, create the environment for people to be open, create the environment for people to listen and collaborate, then you don't get to that relationship and you won't get to the possibilities. Well, you might get the possibilities, but are they fleshed out properly? Are you ready for them? It's full circle.
Mark, you talk about certification and I don't have one. And I do this. This is what I do, but it's not who I am. And I will attract a certain kind of person who isn't worried that I don't have a certificate or diploma on the wall. It's how I'm showing up in conversation that supports that individual. And as much as some of that can be taught, some of it is I've developed over time, and I think I've developed it even more over the past 10 years than I did in my certification program when I took that official training and just didn't finish it. Just didn't feel like it didn't feel like it was the box I wanted to be in. I wanted a little bit more flexibility and ability to move around and be my own person and to let that kind of evolve. And I've done that, but it's not for everybody. This will actually exclude opportunities for me as well. Getting certain contracts will not happen. I know that, but I'm also okay with it.
That's awesome. We often talk about Sir.expert when we do these sessions. And that sir or ma'am or let's go person.expert that shows up and that way of being is not conducive to the unlearning that needs to happen for the learning to occur. And I learned that from you two. So basically that unlearning that openness has to be, you got to be able to park your Cert.expert. And you know what? In the beginning, I showed up and I still do show up sometimes with that Cert.expert. I've known this, I've seen this. And I very often starts now in training by saying, first rule, participate. Second rule, don't believe a word I say. And I put that out there because I want to remind myself, but also them, that they come up with what they've seen, heard, done, witnessed. And I come with what I've seen, heard, done, and witnessed. And it's important for them to have their own learning and to be able to park some of that, to be able to make room for other learnings. And as a group, I learn every time. I learn every time we interact in this way. I learn every time we interact with others. And that's because we're showing up in that non-expert, non-professional way and allowing it to happen.
And one thing with that, I think what that does unintentionally is gives permission to everybody there that if you're showing up as the head person leading the session, that they're open to learning and letting things go and not being perfect and not needing to be the expert, allows them to play in that same space of not needing to be the expert, to be okay to be fallible, to make mistakes, and to maybe let go of some of the things they've held so tight about what they believe about an expert model up until that moment.
I am, as you know, I'm one of the ones that has the certification.
Expert.
But I quickly talk about that. In fact, I very rarely talk about that in my introductions. But what I do tell people is my story. And so I was introduced to this, the change, the practical amateur approach to coaching in my mid-career as a manager. And I started to practice this as in my work, I integrated, it made sense to me. I knew I wasn't making the cut. I was missing some pieces of how to have different conversations, and I wanted to do a good job at it. And these practical way of doing it really supported that development. And then I was almost forced into getting my certification by a mentor who said, I want you to do this because you are a natural ability. So I want to talk about you, Ian. It's all in you, and this will just give you ways in the future. So, but I will say that really helped me because I am the personality. I need to be forced into like a structure and learn that way. It was good for me to go into that formal process. But then you have to find your own way. So I think that, and what I've seen now, hundreds and hundreds, because we've done this so many times. I mean, thousands, actually, I can say thousands in my work. Because as you know, for 10 years, I did this with frontline managers and aspiring leaders. There's so much natural ability out there. And so giving people some, you said the word skills and tools, Mark, they're important because they hold the practice together. They give people, I'm going to use these two words that we use a lot, confidence and competence. But there needs to be this inner knowing of wanting to make that shift on how you show up, to not be Cert.expert, to not think that you are responsible to give the answers, to work with organizations who can see this kind of more kind of integrated approach makes better sense for them from a sustainability model. Because our goal is to back our way out and have a group of practitioners, coaching resources, whatever you want to call them, communities of practice that will stay together and continue to learn and grow on their own. And so I love that. And I can see that I get emails, I've shared them with you 10 years later saying, oh my gosh, I was in a room, I met this woman, she talked about you and she talked about the importance of the 3 conversations. So it has sticking power and it's transferable. So to me, that's the ripple effect that we need to be more curious about. How do we create that in organizations versus a model that's very rigid that might give you some immediate growth and development. But I find without that sustainability piece over time, because the purpose of culture, even our own internal cultures, is to sustain itself. We want to be comfortable. And you mentioned the word unlearning. And there's a period of time as growing adults we are learning something quite different to the way we've been nurtured, the way we've been taught, the way we've been rewarded. And so now we're on another path, and it's wobbly and it's uncomfortable, and you don't feel super competent and confident. So to stay able to stay there so you can start to build that and travel with that takes time. Ian and I were just talking about, when we do our work, how we drop in some foundation pieces, but then we do what we call these boot camps. That's what we call them, but we space it out over time so people can digest and practice. And you talked about two really important things at the beginning of change, Mark, which I'm just having an aha moment with you on, the idea of self-awareness and desire to continue to build self-awareness, and this desire to show up a different way and contribute another way, because it's another way to contribute to supporting people, to mobilizing change, to help grow our capacity to make a difference. So I'm not sure how much longer I'll do this in a formal way, in a work way, but I feel like, this has been how I wanted to show up for the last 15, 20 years of my life. So, and I've seen it reap its benefits informally and in a formal way.
Okay, trick question time. Which one comes first, competence or confidence? Because you talked about them, Karen. Which one comes first?
The chicken or the egg?
Well, I'm going to honor this experience. I was speaking about formal. I got a chance to do something formal, a program called Women Leading Change in Veterans Affairs, where I worked. And a woman by the name of Riona Sharpnack was leading that program. And it was, I didn't know, but it was coaching at the time. That she didn't even use the words coaching. And we were learning to be a different way. We're learning how to challenge our perceptions and assessments. And we had to come in with a project. So shortening the story, this one woman put her hand up. She goes, I know what I need to do, but I need to get the competence before I'm going to have the competence. And Riona said, well, is that the right order, or is it the other way around? And she made us stop and think about it. And she said, if you don't have the confidence right now that this is your right path, what if you just knew that? What if you trusted yourself? What if you just knew it was one step, one step, one step? And that competence follows when confidence is there, that you just know, you trust and trust and learn and trust and learn. And it was like, oh my gosh, how many times did I hold myself back? It was my awareness, because I didn't feel I was competent enough to be an offer, to step into something different, to take a chance, because I felt I just needed more time to be better and better and better. And sometimes that belief system, I actually didn't do things that were really important to me. So I've shifted that the confidence is there. I mean, you invest, you learn, you practice. I think of Olympians. How many times does a downhill skier have to go down to be ready for the Olympics? If they don't have the confidence, right, to go down, practice, learn, fall, jump up, lesson, learn, like, it made me realize that kind of endurance and belief system is critical to elevating your best self, would be my words, whatever that is for you. So yeah, they literally took a 180 shift of order, Mark.
So what did we land on? Confidence and then competence?
Can it be the opposite?
The opposite. And I coached a team that was going to the Olympic trials for curling, and I can share this because they've told me I can share it. I don't get into personals, but I introduced that to them because it's a lot of pressure. One team gets to go to the Olympics. And I said, your confidence is always going to be in front of that. And that isn't the ego talking. There's a shift. I'm great, I'm good. Like, it isn't that. It's that grounded part where the gut says, like, I've done the work. I know how to reset. I know what recovery feels like. I've practiced. So it was just to remind them that that's all there. And when you have that reset of confidence in the middle of a game, when it's not going, your best game isn't showing up, your best self can show up. So what can you do to reset? So it was huge for them to shift that. because there's a lot of competitive worlds that really focus on competency development. Think about, we don't even talk about it. Confidence, which is an internal way of being.
You know what? I just, even though this past weekend I was TV limited, I did get to watch some CrossFit afterwards, because there's the semifinal week in my world. And there was one girl they were interviewing after her event, and she did really well. She finished second, and she'll go to the games this year. And one thing that they were talking about was having the confidence to stay in your own lane, and to trust in your plan and not worry about the result. Just knowing that if you have that confidence and just maintain your pace, regardless of what everyone else is doing beside you, you will finish as good as you possibly can, because you're not focused on everything else. And in the process of doing that, people would fall off the pace that they set because they weren't following their own plans, but she followed hers. She had the confidence and stuck with it from beginning to end. And she ended up finishing, I think, that race in the top couple, because she ran her race, being confident in her abilities based on her experience and past. And it showed her competence in the end. It was, I was thinking of this model when I was listening to her.
So if you have a non-confident expert, you just might have a standstill. You might have wasted talent. So they go together for sure.
Yeah, because you might not step up, right? If you're not confident, I've got my certificate in the back. But if I'm not confident enough to put myself out there, no one will ever see it. I won't show up the same way.
And we see it because we see people who have the capacity to engage in coaching conversations, and then they say, I was gonna do it, but I wasn't sure. And we keep saying, take the shot. And that speaks to what you said, Karen, practice. That practice, you said it so many times as you were just telling us these stories. And that practice is important. And I think I'm at a point where I realize that they're both there, but they're also both volatile. Because there's no expert that can stay an expert for a long time. So if that search is that expertise, it's going to be short-lived. There's going to be somebody else, something else, a new trend, a new reality that wipes out that expertise, that makes it completely moot. So keeping up with that and having the confidence to take the next step and to explore. But again, circling back to what we said earlier, be open to unlearn and to practice. And we know what practice does. Practice makes
Permanent.
But it's to me, that volatility keeps striking me. And it's not volatility here is not a negative, it's an opportunity. Because as soon as I realize that volatility is there in my confidence and my competence, then I am looking to unlearn and learn more things in that competence side. And I am learning and I'm open to practicing, because that's what gives me my competence level that I need for both to be in sync in order for me to be of service. So it's to both speak to your way of being, the confidence and the competence. Speaks to training, speaks to practice, speaks to take the shot.
And don't be afraid to, I'm going to use the word fail. I joke around about this many times to fellow, people that have, in our community of practice, that I've made my offer 500 times and been turned down 450 times. So that's the confidence. It's not that I'm not doing a good job of that. It is a really different way of looking at this kind of offer. People want me to submit a proposal with all these deliverables and without even, having a conversation with people and kind of learning what's going on for them. Like you just said, the culture and what's going on at the individual level, what's going on at the team level, what's going on at the system level, and talking to different people so you can hear their perceptions, hear their stories. Because culture is a series of stories that are being told. Some of them are really, really old and they keep getting repeated. And so, and then you look at what's my offer, but it's quite different. So I just, that trusting myself is so critical. And the last thing I would say is when we have a new shiny object, I'm not saying that we have a shiny object. You know what I mean? We've talked about this before. You get this wonderful practice and you're practicing it and you feel really good about it. Now you want to share it with everybody, right? And so what I've learned is just to listen for an opening. So I say, start small, but don't be small. So your opening, when you go back in, if you have this new way of wanting to make an offer, it may not be this big thing. It may be a small piece of what you've got to offer. And that's how you build relationship. And so and you continue, you start to, and then people will say, I used to get people coming into my office and I was not allowed, the last year of my work, I was not allowed to do any formal coaching at all. And that's a story for another day. And that was okay. I understood that I had a role to play, but I said to them, this is who I am, like how I listen and how I interact. I won't do anything formal, but people will pop into my office and sit down and say, can I pick your brain for a minute? And they would unload and talk about things. And and it was informally, just asking questions. And a lot of them would say, how come I feel so much better when I leave your office? And that's why they came in to see me, it's what they needed. I paid attention to, what do you need from me right now? That wonderful question, right? And most of the time, people needed someone to listen. And they often talked themselves right into where they needed to, where they were at and what they wanted to do next.
So imagine if we're in my federal government workspace or in our workspaces, and that we manage to create a culture where collaboration from the experts is to share the knowledge, share the abilities. Imagine what that does to the succession challenges that we are facing right now. So it's not, okay, we just lost the Karen who was the go-to coaching person in that organization. You've spread that out now. So it's not dependent on the expert. It's a culture. So the expert becomes the innovator that brings in the tools, but then spreads it around and helps people practice. And all of a sudden that succession is there, and the organization doesn't become dependent on having that expert go in, go away, drink the blue Kool-Aid, come back. And it's not just their thing. To me, that's the ideal learning environment, engagement environment, cultural environment that's conducive to getting those relationships and exploring those possibilities and eventually moving to action, which is what we all want to get to.
And I think something that you both are saying but haven't quite said is accessing the expert within, and how we have so much expertise internally that may not fit on an org chart or in your work description, that is all accessible by all of us. And what we do, or a big part of what we do, is trying to highlight that for people, have them bring their expertise to the surface. And then we add a few tools and give them some practice. And then they're able to elevate that and spread that. And it's way more sustainable in that way than it is relying on a Karen, Mark, and Ian to come fix their problem.
And I just want to add a word that was really important. Integrate is what you just described. It's not this standalone thing that you do. It's how do I take these and integrate them where it makes sense and where I'm already doing. So it's I love that idea, Ian, that it's the formal program that I was in, one of the founders is doing some really, really cool short videos. She's not well, she's terminally ill. And I said, she says less words now, but man, they hit you right here. And she talks about how so many people come into the formal certification of coaching. Very few of them go out and build a coaching practice. Mm-hmm. But they are integrating the principles, the tools, all of the stuff that they learn in really important work. And I thought, she goes, so that's been been very intriguing for her in her many, many years doing this work as a in a formal program, that she's seeing a shift of who's coming in and what they're doing with this wonderful capacity building and how they're integrating it into the world, which takes such a burden off of our shoulders. Oh gosh, I've got to now have, like, some of us, that's it. Like for you, Ian, that is you're meant to do this. This is it. But for many, it isn't. It's how do we integrate that? And I love what you just said, that drawing on the expert in them. That really, you've never said that before. No, you should write that down.
No, I wrote it down too, because it's the first time I've said it too. It kind of feels like a semi rip-off of a Tony Robbins thing, but I don't know exactly what it is. Mark? Anyways, it doesn't matter.
Probably that where he would say typically that we are the expert of ourselves. Whether we choose to exploit that or not is going to be a choice. So that means being open to exploring and being generous to ourselves and being allowing us a chance to develop that expertise even more and use it, which is sometimes what holds us back. So that whole confidence thing. So that's probably where that comes from, but you're dead on. That expert went in.
Final thoughts?
Yeah.
Kind of feel we're there.
I'm going to give a final thought. It's going to be my final thought, but I don't own it because I've heard it from Karen many times, where you made the statement, and there's probably a story around it, but I forget the story. I just forget. I remember these words. I am at my best when
you are my equal.
And keep that in mind. If I keep that in mind, it makes sure that it ensures that I have the objective of propping everybody else around me rather than showing up as the expert.
And if we all are our own personal experts, that propping up actually elevates everybody.
Someone asked me one day what my gift was, and I said, the thing I notice is that I can hear what people are longing for, like this, their natural will, and I can hear it, and I listen for that, and then I talk about that with them when I'm hearing. And that you just said about the equal, it's in there. It's like giving it a place to be seen for them and their own voice to it, and it unleashes it all. And that's why they don't need my answer. They have it in them, and when they get to narrate that and notice it takes a life of its own, which I think is so very, very cool.
It's almost like they're able to own it once they've able to voice it, but they haven't been able to voice it up until then. So what it reminds me of, Karen, is your it's almost like your tagline of it's off of my tongue, but it'll be on yours, about creating space for human potential to emerge.
I say fully emerge because it's already there. This was really cool. Thank you. Mark actually mobilized this one today with a lot of energy, and I'm glad we went here.
Even though he doesn't remember what it was supposed to be about.
Beauty of our conversations.
All right. Well, thanks, Ian. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Yeah. Bye.